The air in the Stratton Dynamics engine room was thick with tension, arrogance, and motor oil. A dozen engineers in $1,000 suits circled a sleek, metallic beast, a 12-cylinder prototype engine meant to revolutionize the industry. But right now, it was a $12 million embarrassment that refused to start. Then came the voice that cut through the static. "If she can fix it, I'll pay for her college myself." Laughter erupted. Phones came out. A few engineers leaned against the wall, smirking, sipping their lattes as if they were watching a prank unfold. The she in question was Ara Whitaker, a teenage girl in a hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder, standing near the exit where she'd just come to visit her father. Her father, Henry, the janitor CEO Marshall Greystone, stood tall and polished in the center of the room, silver hair slicked back like his pride. The challenge had come from his lips like a casual insult. A show of dominance. He didn't expect her to move, no one did, but she did. Ara stepped forward slowly. The laughter wavered. Her father shook his head slightly, silently begging her to let it go. But she didn't. She walked into the circle like a soldier entering enemy ground. Her hands trembled slightly as she asked, "Can I touch it?" "Be my guest," Marshall said with a smug grin. More phones rose. This was content gold. The janitor's daughter fumbling with cutting-edge tech? This would be circulating on Slack channels by lunch. But what happened next wasn't funny. Ara dropped her worn-out backpack to the ground with a soft thud. She opened it and pulled out a grease-stained notebook, pages held together with tape and determination. She flipped to a section filled with intricate diagrams, hand-drawn notations that made two engineers go wide-eyed. She circled the engine once, paused, tilted her head like she was listening to it breathe. Then she got to work. Her fingers found seams and screws like they were old friends. She removed a panel, then another. She swapped out a capacitor so tiny, most hadn't even seen it buried deep inside the control housing. She pulled the replacement from her own bag. "She carries components?" someone muttered. "That's not just some janitor's kid," another added. Less than 2 minutes later, she stepped back. "Try it now," she said. The lead tech rolled his eyes, but pressed the ignition switch anyway. The engine didn't cough. It didn't struggle. It purred, clean, smooth, alive. The sound filled the room like a rising heartbeat. Everyone froze. Marshall's face went pale. A technician let out a slow, involuntary clap. Then silence again, thicker than before. Because no one was asking how she did it. They were all wondering the same thing. Who is she? Cliffhanger. The room expected failure. What they got was a revolution. The room hadn't moved since the engine roared to life. The deep, powerful hum still echoed off the steel walls, bouncing through the ears and egos of everyone present. For the first time that day, the Stratton Dynamics engineers weren't whispering or laughing. They were stunned into absolute stillness, caught between disbelief and something else, fear. A slow, uneven clap broke the silence. It came from a young technician in the back, barely out of grad school, tears welling in his eyes. Another clap followed, then nothing. The applause fizzled before it could build, suffocated by tension too thick to cut. Marshall Greystone raised his hand sharply. The clapping stopped. "Who are you?" "Who are—" he asked, his voice no longer laced with mockery but something unfamiliar. Caution. Ara wiped the grease from her hands with the inside of her hoodie sleeve. Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. "Just someone who loves engines. It should have been an end to the conversation." But the engineers didn't move. One woman stepped forward. Donna. Her eyes locked onto the notebook still in Ara's hand. "Where did you get that?" she asked, voice measured but shaking. "That page. That's our confidential design. Only 6 people have ever seen that." Ara hesitated. Then she opened the notebook again and flipped to another section. Pages of sketched wiring, fluid dynamics, handwritten equations with dates scribbled in the corners, 3 years old. Her voice dropped even softer. "I drew it." This time the laughter that followed was nervous, scattered, panicked. Engineers looked at each other, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or a hoax. "You're telling us you reverse engineered a $4 million prototype from scratch?" one man barked. "I didn't reverse engineer it," she replied, her voice flat now. She turned the page again. "I designed mine, this one's better." Marshall's face turned a dark shade of crimson. He snatched the notebook from her hands. He flipped through the pages faster, then slower. His expression shifted with every turn. Confusion, disbelief, rage. There were too many notes, too many annotations, too much authentic engineering insight to fake. Each page dated, detailed, deliberate. "You designed this when you were 13? He said finally, voice like gravel. "I never said I designed that engine," Ara corrected. "I said I designed mine, yours copied it." A collective gasp swept through the room like a gust of wind through dry leaves. Henry stepped forward now, still clutching his mop like a shield. His knuckles were white. His mouth opened, then closed again. But it wasn't time yet. His eyes stayed locked on Ara, his daughter, standing tall in a room that was never built for her. Marshall looked like he might collapse under the weight of the silence. But Ara wasn't done. She turned back to the stunned engineers. "I didn't come here to prove anything," she said. "I just came to see my dad. You're the ones who made it a game. I played, and I won." A hush fell again, thicker this time. Not of disbelief, but revelation. Something had broken open, something that couldn't be closed again. Cliffhanger. "Your engine didn't inspire mine. Yours copied mine." The silence after Ara's final words wasn't just stunned, it was seismic. Something ancient and buried had shifted. Henry Whitaker had been standing off to the side the whole time, mop in hand, as if invisible. But now he stepped forward into the center of the room, into the weight of his past. His voice cracked slightly, but his spine straightened as he spoke. "There was a woman who used to work here," he began, looking directly at Marshall. "Brilliant. Way ahead of her time. Her name was Marin Whitaker, my wife. Ara's mother." Marshall's jaw clenched. Donna's head snapped toward Henry. The younger engineers glanced around, confused, but those who had been at Stratton for longer, those whose eyes widened and posture shifted, knew exactly what that name meant. "She designed the first iteration of this engine," Henry continued. "Long before your team slapped a logo on it and called it revolutionary. She built it in silence, worked through nights, solved problems no one else could even understand. But when she realized her work was being stolen, leaked piece by piece to others without her name, she tried to stop it." His voice hardened, "and the next week she was gone. A lab accident. That's what the company said." Dead silence. "I never believed it," he added. "Not for 1 second. I took the only thing left of her, our daughter, and disappeared." The floor felt like it had tilted. The whir of the engine running in the background was the only sound, soft but relentless, like Marin's presence echoing through time. Donna stepped forward, slowly. "I remember her," she whispered. "She gave a seminar once, on propulsion modeling. She explained how airflow data could be layered like sheet music, like a melody." "I remember that too," another voice added. "Leonard. Older, his beard streaked with gray, his eyes full of something heavier than surprise, guilt. "I was here when it happened," he said. "I saw the internal files disappear. I watched her research get rerouted through other departments. We were told to stay quiet, that it was classified." He looked at Henry, then at Ara. "I stayed quiet." Henry nodded, but his eyes were fierce. "You weren't the only one. I cleaned the labs. I heard the whispers. I saw the panic in the engineer's eyes when her name was mentioned. They erased her, but not completely, not her mind, not her blood." He pointed to Ara. "They didn't bury this." Marshall took a step back. His carefully curated control began to crack around the edges. He opened his mouth, perhaps to deny, to threaten, to save face. But Ara cut him off. "Do you really think any of this can be undone now?" she asked, stepping toward him. I didn't want this. I didn't come here for revenge. But I'm not walking away from the truth. Not again. She looked around the room, locking eyes with each of the engineers. Some were pale, others ashamed. But more than a few looked relieved, as if a weight had been lifted. You asked me to fix something broken, she said, voice steady. I did. Now it's your turn. Then she reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone. With a tap, the screen lit up. Audio, video, confession, she said softly. It already has. Cliffhanger. Ara raises her phone. Audio, video, confession, it already has. By dawn, the storm had a name. Ara Whitaker. The footage of the moment, the mocking dare, the dead engine resurrected, the buried confession, spread like wildfire. What started as a few whispers in niche tech forums spiraled into a digital inferno. Stratton cover-up was trending by 6 a.m. News outlets scrambled, talk shows speculated, and by mid-morning every major network had the same breaking headline: Genius janitor's daughter exposes corporate theft on camera. Inside Stratton Dynamics, the atmosphere had changed. Gone were the smug chuckles and tight-lipped nods. Now the air was thick with tension. Employees crowded around monitors in the cafeteria, hallways, break rooms. They watched the footage on loop, the moment Ara calmly dismantled the impossible, the crack in Marshal Greystone's icy mask, the confession. Then came the rumble of authority. A sudden silence fell as a convoy of black vehicles rolled up outside. The gold lettering on Navy jackets read like a death sentence to corrupted power: Federal Bureau of Scientific Ethics. Agents moved like clockwork, unspeaking, purposeful. No one stopped them. No one dared. They entered the Stratton lobby and made for the executive elevators. 20 minutes later, Marshal Greystone was led out in handcuffs. Cameras swarmed. Reporters shouted his name. But it was the look on the employees' faces, part disbelief, part joy, part stunned relief, that told the real story. Cheers broke out, spontaneous, raw. Some clapped, others wept. Most simply stood frozen, absorbing the impossible. The man who ruled through silence had finally been silenced. Back inside, in the quiet of an old break room, Ara sat beside her father. No words passed between them for several minutes. Just the low hum of a vending machine and the faraway echo of news anchors dissecting their lives. I never thought it would come to this, Henry said finally, his voice distant, cracked with awe. I didn't either, Ara replied, staring blankly ahead. I just wanted to play the violin. She looked down at her hands, still faintly stained with oil. But standing in that room, I realized something. I wasn't just my mother's daughter, I was her voice, and it was time someone spoke for her. Henry nodded slowly, his eyes glassy. She'd be proud of you, he whispered. Before Ara could respond, a hush rippled through the building once again. Outside, the crowd parted. A long black limousine rolled up to the curb. Its windows tinted so dark they looked like obsidian. No one knew who was inside, but something about the vehicle demanded reverence. The driver stepped out, tall and formal. He opened the rear door gently, with a deference usually reserved for royalty. Out stepped a woman. She wore a sleek emerald coat that shimmered beneath the morning light. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, her eyes sharp but warm as they scanned the crowd, until they found Ara. Grandma? Ara whispered. It was Olivia Whitaker, Marin's mother, the woman who had spent years in silence, holding grief like glass in her chest. Her voice trembled as she approached. I kept everything, Olivia whispered. Every letter, every design, every article your mother ever wrote. I never believed I'd live to see this day. Ara stepped into her arms. For a moment, the world stilled. Time folded. Grief melted into legacy. Then came another figure, a man in a crisp suit but with the air of someone who valued truth over titles. He introduced himself as Calvin Rohr, acting director of the Department of Scientific Ethics. He carried a folder. What is this? Ara asked cautiously. Justice, he said, and an opportunity. Inside was a signed declaration, endorsed by senators, federal agencies, and private research groups. It announced the formation of the Whitaker Initiative, a federally funded program to protect, support, and elevate young inventors from underrepresented communities. At the center of the initiative, a new national research institute bearing one name, Maren Whitaker. On the first page of the advisory board list was another name, Ara Whitaker. Tears gathered in her eyes, not from the title, not from the offer, but from what it meant. Her mother's work would not rot in silence. It would rise. That evening, Ara stood on a quiet stage inside a small community center not far from where the scandal had erupted. Children watched her with wide eyes, some holding tiny notebooks, some clutching pencils as if they were tools of revolution. She lifted her violin. The lights dimmed. The crowd fell silent. The first note was soft, fragile, but then it grew. Rich, fierce, echoing through every corner of the room like a declaration. It wasn't just music, it was memory. It was every late-night sketch her mother had drawn, every stolen idea, every moment of silence Ara had endured waiting to be heard. And now she was. As the final note faded, no one clapped, no one moved. They simply sat, transfixed, transformed. Outside, a new billboard lit up above the city skyline. It showed two figures, Maren and Ara, standing side by side. The caption was simple: "The truth always rises." Cliffhanger. That night she didn't stand alone. She stood with legacy. The stage was small, the lighting soft and humble, but the weight in the room felt holy. Ara Whitaker stood under the spotlight, not as a prodigy, not as a viral sensation, not even as the daughter of a stolen legacy, but as something simpler, something purer, a girl holding her mother's violin, ready to let the truth speak through music. The audience was quiet. Children in the front row with bright eyes and restless feet, older engineers off to the side, their expressions still, carrying the weight of confession. Among them sat Henry Whitaker and Olivia, 3 generations of a family once silenced, now standing in the light. She raised the bow, and with that first note, the air shifted. It was soft, almost like breath, barely there, but it reached every corner of the room. A hush swept through the space, not demanded but earned. The melody was slow, haunted, unraveling with each draw of the string like the turning of old pages. Then it built, layer by layer, until it wasn't just music anymore. It was Maren's story, Ara's pain, Henry's silence, Olivia's grief. It was every moment someone looked away, every whisper behind closed doors, every time someone said not now, not here, not worth the fight. It was what it sounded like when injustice was finally named. Ara played like she wasn't in the room, like she was reaching through time. And for those few minutes, no one moved. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Just breath, shared, sacred. The final note lingered longer than it should have, then disappeared. But no one clapped. They didn't have to. They just breathed, as if exhaling for the first time in years. Outside, night had fallen over the city, but above the Stratton skyline something new had risen. A towering digital billboard lit up against the black sky. On it, 2 figures, Maren Whitaker and her daughter side by side. Not as victims, not as footnotes, but as giants. Underneath, 5 words burned across the screen. Truth doesn't die in silence. Ara stepped down from the stage quietly, her violin still in hand. Children reached for her, not to praise her but to understand her. They didn't see a genius. They saw someone who had survived the silence and turned it into something beautiful. Olivia stood near the door, wiping a tear as she smiled. Henry, quiet as ever, just placed a gentle hand on his daughter's back. And Ara? She looked out at the billboard through the glass, eyes steady, from being mocked by a room full of engineers. to becoming the face of a national truth movement, from grease-stained notebooks to federal recognition, from silence to symphony. But this story, her story, wasn't over, because Stratton was just one empire. And if a place like that could bury a name as powerful as Marin Whitaker's, how many more secrets were still locked behind closed lab doors, boardrooms, and forgotten files? How many more daughters were waiting to be heard? So stay tuned. This was just part 1. The storm has started, and part 2, it's already on the horizon.